Hey everyone, before I share what happened to me, if this story resonates with you or makes you think about your own family dynamics, please hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Trust me, by the end of this story, you'll understand why standing up for yourself sometimes requires courage you didn't know you had. And please, share this with someone who might need to hear it. My name is Sarah, and I'm 32 years old. I work as a registered nurse at Presbyterian Hospital here in Dallas, Texas. For the past 8 years, I've been married to Michael, and we have 2 beautiful children, Emma, who's 6, and little Jake, who just turned 3. I'm telling you this story because what happened at my sister-in-law's family lunch changed everything, and I need you to understand that sometimes the people closest to us can be the ones who hurt us the most. It was a scorching hot Sunday in July. The kind of Texas heat that makes the asphalt shimmer and forces everyone indoors by noon. Michael's family has this tradition of monthly Sunday lunches at his sister Rebecca's house in Plano. Rebecca married into money. Her husband David owns 3 successful car dealerships across the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Their house is one of those sprawling suburban mansions with perfectly manicured lawns, a 3-car garage, and the kind of kitchen that appears in home improvement magazines. I'd been dreading this lunch for weeks, though I couldn't quite put my finger on why. Maybe it was the way Rebecca always seemed to scrutinize everything about me, from my Target dresses to my 5-year-old Honda Civic parked next to their gleaming Mercedes and BMW. Or maybe it was how she'd make these subtle comments about how some people prioritize different things in life, always with that perfectly practiced smile that never quite reached her eyes. The morning started normally enough. I'd gotten up early to prepare a homemade peach cobbler, using peaches I'd bought from a roadside stand in East Texas the weekend before. Cooking from scratch was something I took pride in, especially since my nursing schedule often meant quick meals and takeout during the week. Michael was in the shower, and the kids were watching cartoons in the living room of our modest 3-bedroom ranch house in Richardson. As I pulled the golden cobbler from the oven, filling our kitchen with the sweet aroma of cinnamon and fresh peaches, I felt good about my contribution to the lunch. Rebecca always insisted that everyone bring something, though she'd inevitably order catering from some upscale Dallas restaurant and make a point of mentioning how much it cost. "You ready for the Rebecca show?" Michael asked, adjusting his polo shirt in the hallway mirror. He knew how these lunches affected me, but family was family, and his parents would be there too. Michael's relationship with his sister was complicated. She was 3 years older and had always treated him like the baby brother who couldn't quite measure up to her standards of success. "Just promise me you'll speak up if she starts her usual commentary," I said, covering the cobbler with aluminum foil. "I'm tired of biting my tongue. She's not that bad, Sarah. She just has opinions." That was Michael. Always the peacekeeper, always finding excuses for Rebecca's behavior. It was one of the things I both loved and found frustrating about my husband. His desire to avoid conflict sometimes meant that conflicts just festered instead of being resolved. The drive to Plano took 45 minutes in Sunday traffic. Emma and Jake were excited to see their grandparents and swim in Aunt Rebecca's pool. I watched suburban Dallas roll by through the passenger window, strip malls giving way to increasingly upscale neighborhoods with their massive houses set back from the street behind decorative gates and professional landscaping. Rebecca's neighborhood, Willowbrook Estates, was the kind of place where HOA fees cost more than some people's rent, and every lawn looked like it had been trimmed with scissors. Their house sat on a corner lot, a 2-story colonial with white columns and a circular driveway. David's latest acquisition, a silver Porsche Cayenne, was parked prominently in front of the 3-car garage. "Remember, we're here for family," Michael said quietly as we gathered our things from the car. "Just focus on the kids having fun with their grandparents." Rebecca answered the door in a flowing white sundress that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled, and her makeup looked professionally done despite the casual family setting. "Sarah, Michael, come in, come in. You're the last ones to arrive." The house was immaculately clean and decorated in that modern farmhouse style that was trending on Pinterest. Lots of white shiplap, mason jar light fixtures, and carefully distressed furniture that had probably never actually been used on a farm. The air conditioning was set so cold, I immediately got goosebumps, a sharp contrast to the oppressive heat outside. Michael's parents, Jim and Carol, were already settled in the living room with drinks. His father worked for decades as a machinist at Lockheed Martin before retiring, and his mother had been an elementary school teacher. They were good, hard-working people who'd raised their children to value family and integrity, though they sometimes struggled to understand how their daughter had become so focused on material success. "Sarah, honey, how are you managing with those long shifts at the hospital?" Carol asked, standing to give me a hug. She always asked about my work with genuine interest, unlike Rebecca, who seemed to view my nursing career as somehow beneath what someone married to her brother should be doing. "It's been busy, but I love what I do," I replied, setting my cobbler on the kitchen island next to an elaborate spread of catered Mediterranean food. The contrast was stark. My homemade dessert in a glass baking dish next to Rebecca's elegant charcuterie boards and gourmet salads arranged on expensive white serving platters. "Oh, you brought dessert," Rebecca said, though her tone suggested this was somehow unexpected or unwelcome. "How domestic of you." "I actually ordered some artisanal gelato from that new Italian place in Deep Ellum, but I'm sure we'll find room for both." That was classic Rebecca, the backhanded compliment that managed to be both dismissive and condescending. I felt my jaw clench, but I forced a smile. The kids love peach cobbler, and the peaches are fresh from East Texas. "Well, aren't you just Martha Stewart?" she said with a laugh that was meant to sound playful, but had an edge to it. I wish I had time to bake from scratch. Between David's business obligations and my charity work, I barely have time to breathe. David appeared from what I assumed was his home office, phone still pressed to his ear, discussing some business deal in that loud, confident voice that successful salesmen develop. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with graying hair and the kind of tan that comes from golf courses rather than actual work outdoors. He nodded at us and held up one finger, indicating he'd be just another minute. The lunch proceeded as these family gatherings usually did. The adults sat around Rebecca's massive dining room table, while the kids ate at a smaller table on the back patio, visible through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The conversation revolved around David's business success, Rebecca's involvement with various Dallas charity organizations, and their recent vacation to a resort in Turks and Caicos. "The service there was incredible," Rebecca was saying, gesturing with her wine glass. "Our concierge arranged everything: private beach access, couples massages, dinner reservations at the best restaurants. It's so nice to be able to just relax and not worry about anything." "Sounds expensive," Jim commented mildly. He and Carol had never been the type to spend money frivolously, having raised their family on modest incomes during tougher economic times. "Well, you get what you pay for," David said, finally off his phone and joining the conversation. "We work hard, so we should enjoy the fruits of our labor. Life's too short to pinch pennies." I caught Michael's eye across the table. We'd been talking about taking the kids to Disney World for 2 years, but between my student loans from nursing school and the mortgage on our house, it just wasn't financially feasible. Not yet, anyway. We'd planned a long weekend camping trip to Lake Texoma instead, something the kids were excited about, but it felt modest compared to international resort vacations. "What about you two?" Rebecca asked, turning her attention to Michael and me. "Any vacation plans this summer?" "We're taking the kids camping at Lake Texoma next month," I said. They've never been camping before, so they're really excited about sleeping in tents and roasting marshmallows. Rebecca's expression was one of barely concealed amusement. "Camping? In this heat? Oh my goodness, Sarah, that sounds challenging. I don't think I could survive without air conditioning and room service." "It'll be fun," Michael said, though I could tell he was already feeling defensive. "The kids need to experience the outdoors, learn some self-reliance." "Self-reliance," Rebecca repeated, as if testing the words. "That's certainly one way to look at it. I suppose not everyone can afford proper vacations. There's nothing wrong with budget travel." The words hung in the air like humidity before a thunderstorm. I felt heat rise in my cheeks that had nothing to do with the Texas summer. Around the table, the conversation faltered. Jim cleared his throat uncomfortably, and Carol suddenly became very interested in her salad. "Rebecca," Michael said quietly, "that's not—" "What? I'm not judging anyone. I'm just saying that everyone has different priorities. Some people prefer to spend their money on experiences and comfort, while others, She gestured vaguely in our direction. Others make different choices. It was the way she said different choices that broke something inside me. Like our financial situation was somehow a moral failing rather than the reality of being a young family with student loans, a mortgage, and the everyday expenses of raising 2 children. Like my decision to work as a nurse, helping people during some of the most vulnerable moments of their lives, was somehow less valuable than her charity luncheons and shopping trips. "You're right, Rebecca," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "We do make different choices. I chose a career where I help save lives instead of just writing checks to feel good about myself. I chose to teach my children that character matters more than the price tag on your vacation. And I chose to marry a man who values family and integrity over showing off his wealth." The silence that followed was deafening. Rebecca's face went through several expressions: surprise, anger, and then that cold smile she used when she felt cornered. "Well," she said finally, "I suppose some people need to make themselves feel better about their limitations by criticizing others who've been more successful." That was it. The final straw. I stood up so quickly my chair scraped against the hardwood floor. "You know what, Rebecca? I'm tired of your passive-aggressive comments about our life, our choices, our financial situation. Every single family gathering, you find some way to make Michael and me feel small, like we're not good enough for your perfect little world." "Sarah," Michael started, but I was beyond caring about keeping the peace. "No, Michael, I'm done pretending this is okay. Rebecca, I work 12-hour shifts on my feet, dealing with life and death situations, coming home exhausted, but knowing I made a difference in someone's life. You spend your days shopping and gossiping at charity events, contributing nothing but your husband's money and your judgment of everyone else." Rebecca's composed facade finally cracked. "How dare you?" "I'm not finished," I continued, my voice rising. "You want to talk about different choices? Let's talk about choice. You chose to marry money instead of love. You chose to measure success by your bank account instead of your character. And you chose to be a bully to your own family because it makes you feel superior." David was staring at his plate, clearly uncomfortable with the direction the conversation had taken. Jim and Carol looked mortified, not because of what I was saying, but because of what had prompted it. Emma and Jake had stopped eating and were watching through the window, sensing the tension even if they couldn't understand the words. "I think," Rebecca said, her voice shaking with controlled rage, "that you've said quite enough. Maybe it's time for you to leave." "Gladly," I replied, already moving toward the patio to collect my children. "Kids, we're going home." The ride back to Richardson was silent, except for the kids asking why we left early and when they could go swimming at Aunt Rebecca's again. Michael's hands were white-knuckled on the steering wheel, and I could practically feel his internal struggle between loyalty to his family and support for his wife. It wasn't until we got home and put the kids down for naps that he finally spoke. "Sarah, I know Rebecca can be difficult, but did you have to blow up like that? She's still my sister. Your sister has been systematically trying to make me feel inferior for 8 years, Michael. Every gathering, every conversation, every opportunity she gets, and you've never once stood up for me. That's not fair." "I do stand up for you." "When? Name one time you've actually called Rebecca out for her behavior instead of making excuses for her." He was quiet for a long moment, staring out our kitchen window at our modest backyard, where the kids' toys were scattered across the grass and our aging patio furniture sat under the shade of an old oak tree. "I just don't like conflict," he said finally. "Well, I don't like being disrespected by your family, and I especially don't like our children watching their mother be treated like she's not good enough." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the scene in my head, wondering if I'd gone too far, if I'd damaged Michael's relationship with his family permanently. But I also felt something I hadn't felt in years when it came to Rebecca: relief. I'd finally said what needed to be said. The next morning, I was getting ready for my shift at the hospital when my phone started buzzing with text messages. The first was from Carol, Michael's mother. "Sarah, I wanted you to know that what Rebecca said yesterday was completely inappropriate. Your father-in-law and I are ashamed of her behavior. You're a wonderful wife and mother, and we're proud to have you in our family." Then Jim: "Honey, I should have spoken up yesterday. Rebecca was out of line. Don't let her make you feel bad about the life you and Michael have built. But it was the third message that shocked me the most. It was from David, Rebecca's husband. Sarah, I owe you an apology. Rebecca told me what she said about your camping trip and your financial situation. What she didn't tell me was that she's been making comments like that for years. After you left, I had a long conversation with my wife about respect and family. I want you to know that your words yesterday opened my eyes to behavior I should have noticed and stopped long ago. Over the course of that day, I received messages from Michael's cousins, his Aunt Linda, even his grandmother who was 93 and rarely used her phone for anything except emergency calls. Word had spread through the family like wildfire, but not in the way I'd expected. Instead of being ostracized for my outburst, I was being supported. It turned out that Rebecca's condescending behavior wasn't limited to just Michael and me. She'd been making similar comments to other family members for years, criticizing Cousin Jenny's job as a teacher, making snide remarks about Uncle Bob's choice to live in a mobile home after his divorce, questioning why Aunt Linda shopped at thrift stores instead of department stores. The family had been walking on eggshells around Rebecca for so long that they'd normalized her behavior. My explosion at the lunch had given everyone else permission to acknowledge what they'd been feeling, but hadn't been willing to say. The most surprising call came that evening from Rebecca herself. "Sarah," she said, her voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. I need to apologize. David and I have been talking, and my parents called me today. I didn't realize how my comments were affecting everyone." "Rebecca, no, please let me finish. I think I've been so focused on trying to prove that David and I are successful that I've been putting everyone else down to make myself feel better. That's not the person I want to be. And it's not the aunt I want to be to Emma and Jake." It was the first genuine conversation Rebecca and I had ever had. We talked for over an hour about insecurity, about family dynamics, about the pressure she felt to maintain a certain image. She admitted that some of her charity work was more about social status than genuine caring, and that she'd been jealous of the close relationship Michael and I had because her marriage to David, while financially comfortable, lacked the emotional intimacy she saw between us. "I don't expect you to forgive me right away," she said before we hung up, "but I want to do better. I want to be better." 3 weeks later, Rebecca surprised everyone by showing up at our camping trip to Lake Texoma. She drove her Mercedes SUV to the state park, stepped out in designer hiking boots that had clearly never seen dirt, and announced that she wanted to learn how to roast marshmallows properly. She was terrible at camping. She complained about the heat, the bugs, the lack of cell phone service, and the primitive bathroom facilities. But she also laughed when Jake got marshmallow all over his face, helped Emma collect interesting rocks along the shoreline, and sat around our campfire listening to Michael's father tell the same stories he'd been telling for 30 years. On the last night of our trip, as we sat watching the sunset over the lake, Rebecca turned to me and said, "I understand now why you choose this over resorts. This is real. This is family." It's been 6 months since that family lunch, and things aren't perfect. Rebecca still sometimes makes comments that reveal her privileged perspective, and I still sometimes feel defensive about our more modest lifestyle. But there's a respect between us now that didn't exist before. She asks about my work at the hospital with genuine interest, and she started volunteering at a local children's hospital instead of just writing checks to charity organizations. More importantly, Michael has learned to speak up when family dynamics become uncomfortable. He's realized that avoiding conflict doesn't actually prevent it. It just allows problems to fester until they explode. The kids adore their Aunt Rebecca now that she's making an effort to connect with them as people rather than just showing them expensive toys. Emma told me last week that Aunt Rebecca is teaching her about different countries by showing her photos from her travels, and that she wants to be a nurse like Mommy when she grows up so she can help people feel better. I learned something important that day at the family lunch. Sometimes the people we love need to hear hard truths, even if it's uncomfortable. Sometimes standing up for yourself isn't selfish. It's necessary. And sometimes the relationships that require the most work are the ones that become the most meaningful. I also learned that financial success and personal worth are not the same thing. Rebecca had spent years trying to prove her value through material possessions and expensive experiences. But what she really wanted was the same thing we all want: to be valued, respected, and loved for who she is, rather than what she has. The truth is, that family lunch changed all of us. It forced conversations that should have happened years earlier. It cleared the air of resentments that had been building for nearly a decade. And it reminded us all that family isn't about pretending everything is perfect. It's about caring enough about each other to work through the imperfections together. As I write this, I'm preparing for another family lunch at Rebecca's house this Sunday. But this time, I'm looking forward to it. Emma and Jake are excited to swim in the pool. Michael is planning to help David with some project in the garage, and I'm bringing another peach cobbler, not because I have to prove anything, but because I want to share something I made with love. Rebecca texted me yesterday asking if I needed her to pick up anything from the store for the lunch. It's a small gesture, but it represents something bigger: the recognition that we're all contributing to this family in our own ways, and that each contribution has value. Sometimes the most important conversations happen when we finally stop pretending everything is okay and start being honest about what's really going on. That family lunch was the beginning of honesty for our family, and while it was painful in the moment, it was exactly what we all needed. If this story made you think about your own family relationships or inspired you to have a difficult but necessary conversation, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories. Share this video with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to stand up for yourself, even when it's family. Sometimes the hardest conversations lead to the strongest relationships. Thanks for listening to my story. And remember, you deserve to be treated with respect, no matter who it's coming from.